In this sequence, we're going to be examining ethical and social issues surrounding disability and the concept of the normal body. Now, I think typically, on first blush, we tend to think of disability as a kind of a niche interest in bioethics. It seems like it's something that only affects a marginalized few, and hence it's not right at the center of our concerns when we think about bioethics. One of my main goals during this sequence is to try to convince you that actually the notion of disability ought to be much more central to bioethics than we take it at first as being. On the one hand, I'm going to try to show you that disability theory turns out to be a really useful lens for thinking through many of the more standard issues in bioethics, issues concerning reproduction, end-of-life care, and other familiar issues like that. Secondly, once we start actually probing into the notion of disability, we'll quickly discover that it's not at all straightforward to say what disability is. It's actually quite a tricky concept. And once we start questioning what disability is, we're going to realize that we need to question correspondingly what normalcy is as well. We'll realize that the concept of the normal body is just as tricky as the notion of disability. So one of the things we're going to be doing is getting really conceptually clear on what disability and normalcy are. Third, and perhaps most tellingly, disability isn't nearly as marginal of a state as people often think of it as being. In the first place, each of us starts our life radically disabled and will almost certainly end our life radically disabled. And in between, we go through periods of disability because of illness or temporary accidents or whatever else. So disability is a fact of life for all of us at different points in the life cycle. We are all really deeply dependent, in fact, on technology and on other people. We have this idea that disabled people are dependent and the rest of us are independent, but in fact, almost none of us actually could feed and shelter and clothe ourselves if left to our own devices. We rely on the social and the technological world to take care of an enormous number of our needs, and we take that dependence for granted. In fact, we only notice those forms of dependence which are unusual. So if somebody relies on a wheelchair in order to get through their day, we notice that they have a special form of dependence. Whereas when we rely on our car or on the metro to get through the day, we don't notice that. That kind of dependence recedes into the background. But in fact, dependence is a real part of the human condition. It's not something that only affects a few of us. So one of the things I want to do in this sequence is think about bodies as fundamentally dependent, as dependency is part of the human condition, and think about classic bioethical issues through that lens.